Libya's UN-recognized Tripoli government and rival Eastern administration announced a ceasefire. Teachers continue a national strike across Uruguay this Thursday to reject cuts to education budget. China's vaccines for the COVID-19 pandemic will be available and affordable to people worldwide. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Laura Palmeiro. On Friday, Libya's UN-recognized Tripoli government and rival Eastern administration announced a ceasefire. The military has been ordered to stop all combat operations. The Tripoli-seated government of national accord said that the ceasefire requires the areas of Sirte and Jufra to be demilitarized within security arrangements. The Libyan government called for presidential and parliamentary elections in March. For his part, Aguila Saleh, Speaker of pro-Khalifa Haftar Libyan parliament, called on the parties for immediate ceasefire. The UN welcomed both ceasefire initiatives and activating political process. Israeli Air Force has continued bombing the Palestinian territory of the Gaza Strip for 10 consecutive days. Palestinian authorities point out that the attacks of the recent days have mainly affected houses and agricultural territories and describe them as an attempt by Tel Aviv to distract public attention from the political crisis in Israel. Authorities in Mozambique have decided to ease some COVID-19 restrictions, including the reopening of higher education institutions. Our correspondent Laide Mutemba has the details.
Started to ease some control measures aimed at curbing the spread of the novel coronavirus. Some sectors considered to be low risk have already resumed activities, among them higher and technical education. The government has decided to advance on the issuing of national ID cards and identity and residency documents for foreigners. This is the second state of emergency aimed at supporting COVID-19 preventive and control measures. At this moment, Mozambique has surpassed 3,000 positive cases. Analyzing the African continent, the largest number of COVID-19 cases and fatalities have been reported in Southern Africa. South Africa is the worst-hit country and was under lockdown for 5 months. This week, the South African government decided to ease restrictions by allowing alcohol and tobacco sales.
Turkish health authorities confirmed over 1,400 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, taking the total number to more than 254,000. Turkish health authorities noted that over 92,000 COVID-19 tests have been conducted in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, 19 new COVID-19 fatalities were confirmed, bringing the death toll to 6,058. The total number of recoveries now stands at over 234,000. Turkish authorities have ordered mandatory use of masks in public spaces while also restricting people aged 65 and over and those with chronic illness from attending crowded public gatherings. Kenyan health authorities confirmed 426 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, pushing the total number to over 31,000.
Turning on to our COVID-19 statistics today, 426 people have tested positive out of a sample of 5,158 samples collected within the last 24 hours. And this now brings the country caseload to 31,441 number of positive cases. And from all these cases, all are Kenyan, except 9 of them. In terms of disaggregation, we have 239 males, 187 females, with the youngest being a 3-month-old infant, and the oldest is 88 years.
The United Nations has warned that millions of Yemenis could die as a result of the reduction in essential aid provided by the international organization. UN Resident Coordinator in Yemen, Lise Grande, said that the magnitude of the conflict in the country is forcing the UN to close or cut back on programs for education, food, health, medicine, and essential supplies that benefit millions of people in Yemen. Grande added that 70% of Yemeni schools will be closed in the coming weeks due to the lack of funding. The UN official also noted that essential drugs and supplies will no longer be delivered to 189 hospitals and 2,500 clinics, which represent half of the country's health facilities. And the United Nations Security Council held a meeting on the internal situation in Somalia this Thursday, where elections due in November have been postponed due to the novel coronavirus pandemic.
It is, of course, up to Somali stakeholders to determine a model that will guide the electoral process. Nonetheless, we urge that such a model be arrived at through inclusive dialogue and compromise. It should be informed also by principles, including that it must preserve the tradition of peaceful rotation in office every 4 years.
The resumption of dialogue between the federal government and the federal member states has the real potential to act as a catalyst for achieving critical national priorities. I'm encouraged so far that the resumption of dialogue has already allowed for Somali stakeholders at all levels to engage in frank and inclusive discussions in search of a consensual approach to the issue of elections and its modalities.
And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Teachers continue national strike across Uruguay this Thursday to reject cuts to education budget. Teachers' unions stress that the Uruguayan government is using the coronavirus pandemic as a pretext to make cuts to the education budget, which will damage the public education system, affecting millions of students as putting thousands of teachers' jobs at risk, while representing an attack on labor rights and the elimination of free education programs. They also noted that the implementation of the urgent law under consideration limits public institutions that are dependent on the state and threatens the privatization of the sector.
Today culminates the third day of many strikes of secondary school teachers across the country because there is a budget cut, a fiscal adjustment, which has nothing to do with the pandemic. The pandemic has been an excuse. This had already been proposed during the elections. It is a cut that means a super large class size. There will be more than 2,000 teachers who will be left without jobs. And when they talk about education and more education during election campaigns, later you don't see numbers. They are cutting back on education and health, as in all of Latin America. And in the face of cuts, there will be a struggle. We will continue the protests. There will be struggles and disputes and strikes, because the most vulnerable sectors, which are those that attend public education, must be helped. They must be helped with smaller groups, with multidisciplinary teams, and all that is being cut, a 22% cut to public education.
Healthcare personnel conducted a COVID-19 preventive campaign in Peru's capital, Lima, aimed at testing the most vulnerable population in order to curb the spread of the virus. Peru has reported the second highest number of coronavirus cases in South America.
Peru is carrying out targeted operations in order to prioritize attention to vulnerable populations. These vulnerable populations are the elderly and those who suffer from some form of illness. The information systems in our country are being more rigorous. We are being more demanding and trying to notify and record all cases, or all the screened cases that we can identify. I have been through this illness already. Thank God I'm able to communicate with you, but I would have liked you to have listened to me when I called, when I asked for help, and you did not come. It's good that they can come so they can help us, because sometimes it's very difficult to know if you're sick or not.
And 2 tropical depressions are currently advancing in the Caribbean region and could become tropical storms or even hurricanes. According to U.S. National Hurricane Center, Tropical Depression 13 is expected to develop into Tropical Storm Laura this Thursday night. The system was located about 700 miles east of the northern Leeward Island at 5 p.m. local time this Thursday, moving toward the west-northwest at about 21 miles per hour, and is set to pass north of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico on Saturday. Forecasts indicate it could ramp up to hurricane with 75 mile per hour winds by early next week, when it is due to hit South Florida. Meanwhile, Tropical Depression number 14 is expected to develop into a tropical storm Thursday night, in which case it would be named Marco, bringing maximum winds of over 45 miles per hour and heavy rains to the coast of Honduras and the Bay Islands. The two depressions have prompted tropical storm watch alerts for multiple Caribbean islands. And speaking on Cuban television's Mesa Redonda program, this Thursday, the Director General of the Finlay Institute of Vaccines offered information regarding the clinical trial of the vaccine candidate known as Finlay FR1.
We wanted to say this is a step which, in terms of coronavirus, is considered a major step. There are over 200 vaccine candidates in development in the world, and only 30. This is the 30th that secured approval to start the clinical trial. On the screen you can see there's a website on the New York Times called Coronavirus Vaccine Tracker, and on that website a few days ago it was reported that our vaccine, developed by the Finlay Institute of Vaccines, had received approval to start the clinical trial on August 24th.
Cuba is working to produce a specific vaccine to combat the novel coronavirus. At the same time, the Cuban government is negotiating with Moscow to produce the Russian potential vaccine, Sputnik V, once available. From Havana, our correspondent Nayara Tardo has the story.
En el Instituto Finlay de Vacunas en la capital cubana.
At the Finlay Institute of Vaccines in the Cuban capital, scientists work untiringly in the search for a specific treatment against the COVID-19 virus. Seeing how almost the entire world is suffering from a second wave of the pandemic, the scientific community agrees on the fact that only a vaccine capable of immunizing everyone is the definitive cure.
We have made significant progress in just 2 or 3 months of work in these lines of investigation, and we have 4 vaccinal candidates, one of them in a more advanced phase of the investigation. We are hopeful. We see light at the end of the road. The lab's results are promising. We obviously have the responsibility to give updated information on any progress we make.
Other scientific centers, such as the Institute of Tropical Medicine Pedro Curie, the Center of Molecular Immunology, the Center of Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, among others, work together on several strategies to obtain vaccine candidates based on platforms previously developed in this scientific pole, like the one used on the pentavalent vaccine, which includes antigens against 5 different diseases.
We have been working in vaccines based on different biotechnological platforms, in recombinant protein mainly, but researching on different hosts, like in bacteria, mammal cells, yeast, plant cells. This means that we are testing different ways to get the antibodies that would be the main component of this vaccine.
Cuba has a national vaccination program against 14 diseases through an immunization scheme that includes 13 vaccines, 8 of them produced locally. This experience is the basis for the development of a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, a priority for the whole scientific and innovation system of the island nation.
The second most important achievement in the development of our vaccines is the alliances we have made with other institutions. This is the only way of overcoming the technical challenges as fast as possible, creating joint ventures with the best professionals in the country and even in some cases abroad.
According to experts, some 218 institutions around the world are searching a vaccine against COVID-19. 31 of them are in the clinical evaluation phase. Cuba joins international efforts to contain the spread of the virus with the constant pressure of the 60-year-old U.S. blockade that impacts every sector of the Cuban economy.
We work daily without weekends off, fighting for these results to deliver soon to the Cuban people. Because the epidemic is spreading even throughout the world, we cannot say that it will disappear in a short time. Even everything indicates that it is going to stay with us for a long time, and therefore, a vaccine is the only way to have the population protected. For us, it is very important to also have our own vaccine, which can guarantee our people's health and help other countries as well.
The accelerated rise of the virus in the world puts global health coverage on the verge of a collapse. Even with a vaccine available, the experts believe that the technological sovereignty in the development of a cure could relieve the demand. At the same time, Cuba is negotiating with Russia the production of Sputnik 5 on the Caribbean island. Meanwhile, the health authorities insist that for the moment, the only cure is the compliance of hygiene measures, individual and collective discipline.
Nayara Tardo, Telesur, La Habana.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Available and affordable to people worldwide, said in Beijing Liu Jinsen, chairman of the China's National Pharmaceutical Group. A ceremony took place in the capital on Thursday to launch phase 3 clinical trials for the vaccine in Peru. Peru's national health authorities have approved the trials, the latest in China's efforts to strengthen international cooperation in pandemic control. Liu said that China's biotech group is carrying out the research with experts from some of Peru's leading universities. Liu pointed out 2 research and production facilities in Beijing and Wuhan, which has hit the hardest by the virus, that could ensure the supply of 200 million vaccines a year.
We launched the promotion of international clinical trials in April, so we are making key breakthroughs in the United Arab Emirates, which have been very successful. Today, we established a cooperation relationship with Peru and officially received the documents in all aspects, and will soon start equity participation. Up to now, the clinical phase 3 trials, from the experimental point of view, the layout is completely sufficient. We launched the promotion of international clinical trials in April, so we are making key breakthroughs in the United Arab Emirates, which have been very successful. Today, we established a cooperation relationship with Peru and officially received the documents in all aspects, and will soon start equity participation. Up to now, the clinical phase 3 trials, from the experimental point of view, the layout is completely sufficient.
On Thursday, French President Emmanuel Macron noted that his country's military operation against terrorism in Mali will continue, despite the coup against President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. France intervened in Mali in 2013, and since then its military presence in the region has expanded. The former colonial power justifies its intervention by framing it as integral to counter-terrorism efforts.
We are only in Mali at the request of a sovereign people and the request of states in the region, especially the ECOWAS, so it was not up to us to substitute Malian sovereignty. We have to condemn a military coup against a leader who has been democratically elected. We asked for him to be released as quickly as possible and for no violence to be committed. And secondly, for power to be returned to civilians as quickly as possible, and that a rapid democratic transition is implemented. The stability of Mali and the continued fight against terrorism is the priority, because it is the plague of the Malians and their neighbors, Nigerians, Burkinabe, Mauritians, Ivorians who went through troubles in the south recently. And all the states in the region are watching this situation so that nothing is done to divert us from the priority, which is the fight against terrorism, which is the only thing that justifies our presence in Mali at the Malians' request.
German Chancellor and rotating President of the European Union Council, Angela Merkel, has called for stability in the Eastern Mediterranean region following weeks of diplomatic tensions between Greece, Cyprus and Turkey.
We need stability there, and not tension. We have a very critical situation there. I am convinced that if Germany and France join forces here, we will find good solutions that will hopefully make cooperation possible. But that will also make clear that we will not accept attacks on the sovereignty of member states of the European Union. We are in favor of solving problems through discussion and not by escalating tensions, and that applies to all parties involved.
Spanish health authorities confirmed over 3,000 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, while calling on influencers on social media platforms to raise awareness on the importance of observing protective measures.
We have 3,349 new cases with the diagnosis yesterday, but it's true that we have been notified more cases of previous dates. In total, the variation of the notified cases between yesterday and today is around 7,000 cases. It is true that the cases are not the same. It is true that what we are seeing now is not the same than before, but we can't let it rise in, and we can't let people that make mistakes in the interpretation of what this virus means have more strength and influence than the ones who understand what this virus truly is. I think there are a lot of influencers in Spain with a very big visibility that can help us to control the epidemic. I think there is a lot of people in Spain, maybe with less strength or less visibility than those influencers, but that have a population that follows them and sees their pictures and their images that can help us to make that the prevention and control measures are implemented correctly.
In the United States, the Democratic National Convention ended on Thursday with Joe Biden's official speech as its candidate for the November 3rd presidential election. Different political and artistic personalities addressed at the virtual meeting several issues as the health crisis, the prevention of gun violence, the economic crisis and racial inequality, migration and climate change. Former California attorney and Senator Kamala Harris accepted the nomination as a candidate for the vice president and running mate of Biden. For the upcoming November 3rd elections, it is also remarkable that the migrants' vote becomes more important as 32 million migrants will be able to vote. The number of Americans filing a new claim for unemployment benefits rose unexpectedly back above the 1 million last week, a setback for a struggling U.S. job market crippled by the coronavirus pandemic. In a sign that rehiring is underway, the rolls of those continuing to receive jobless benefits is slowly declining, the Labor Department reported on Thursday. Data that indicated a recovery from the recession triggered by COVID-19 continues, though at a more faithful pace than earlier. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Laura Palmeiro. Thank you for watching.